The grand hall of the Conservatoire de Musique was alive with energy, buzzing like a beehive on a warm spring day. The air inside shimmered with excitement and elegance, filled with the soft murmur of conversations blending seamlessly with the clinking of fine china cups and crystal glasses. People dressed in their finest attire moved gracefully through the space, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings adorned with glittering chandeliers. It was an evening where talent met prestige, and everyone present seemed to carry an aura of importance. Among the crowd stood Clara, a woman who couldn't have looked more out of place if she tried. She wasn't tall or strikingly beautiful, nor did her navy blue dress scream sophistication. In fact, it was plain, almost too simple for such an occasion. While others wore designer gowns dripping with sequins and tailored suits that screamed wealth, Clara's outfit was modest, understated. But it wasn't just her appearance that made her blend into the background. It was her demeanor. She didn't walk with confidence or exude charisma. Instead, she lingered quietly near the edges of the room, observing everything yet saying nothing. Clara had always loved music. From the time she was a little girl, she would sit by the old radio at home, listening intently to classical compositions played softly in the background while her mother cooked dinner. Music had been her companion during lonely nights and her solace when life felt overwhelming. Yet, unlike many who shared her passion, Clara never pursued it professionally. Life had other plans for her. Bills needed paying, responsibilities piled up, and dreams took a back seat. So here she was now, attending this prestigious recital not as a performer but as someone who simply wanted to soak in the magic of live music. But tonight, something unusual stirred within her. As she watched renowned musicians take turns dazzling the audience with their virtuosity, Clara felt a strange pull, a quiet whisper urging her to step forward. Maybe it was the thrill of being surrounded by so much talent, or perhaps it was the memory of her mother's voice telling her years ago, "You have a gift, Clara. Don't let fear steal it from you." Whatever it was, it gave her courage, or at least enough courage to approach the event organizers stationed near the stage. The organizer, a harried-looking man juggling papers and answering questions from eager participants, barely glanced at Clara as she timidly handed him her name slip. He scribbled it down without comment, his attention already diverted elsewhere. To him, she was just another name added to the list of hopeful amateurs hoping to make an impression during the open mic segment of the program. Clara didn't expect anything different. After all, why would anyone notice her? She wasn't famous, wealthy, or connected. She was just ordinary. As she returned to her seat, sinking into the plush velvet chair tucked away in a corner, Clara noticed how effortlessly everyone else commanded attention. A young prodigy, barely 18, dazzled a group of admirers with tales of his upcoming European tour. An older gentleman regaled listeners with stories of performing alongside legends decades ago. Even the waitstaff moving between tables seemed to glide with purpose, carrying trays laden with hors d'oeuvres and champagne flutes. Everyone belonged here, except her. Yet despite feeling invisible, Clara couldn't help but feel a flicker of anticipation. This was her chance, however small, to share a piece of herself with the world. For years she had played the piano in solitude, letting her emotions flow freely through her fingertips. Her compositions weren't polished or rehearsed to perfection. They were raw, honest expressions of her innermost thoughts and feelings, and tonight, she hoped they might speak louder than words ever could. Time seemed to crawl as the main performances unfolded. Each musician took the stage with practiced ease, earning applause and admiration from the captivated audience. Clara clapped politely along with everyone else, though her mind was elsewhere. She imagined herself sitting at the piano, her hands hovering nervously above the keys. Would anyone listen? Or would they dismiss her as quickly as the organizer had earlier? Finally, the MC announced the start of the open mic session. One by one, participants stepped onto the stage, some delivering lackluster renditions of well-known pieces, others fumbling nervously under the spotlight. Clara sat perfectly still, her heart pounding faster with each passing moment. When her name was called, she hesitated, suddenly gripped by doubt. What if she failed? What if no one cared? Taking a shaky breath, Clara rose from her seat and walked toward the stage. Every step felt heavier than the last, her legs trembling beneath her. The murmurs around her grew louder as people turned to see who this unknown woman was. Some smirked. Others whispered sarcastic remarks about her unremarkable appearance. Even the maestro himself, seated front and center, raised an eyebrow in mild curiosity before leaning back in his chair, clearly expecting little from her performance. Reaching the piano, Clara paused, her fingers brushing lightly against the smooth surface of the instrument. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, shutting out the noise of the room and focusing instead on the melody that had lived inside her for so long. Then, with a deep breath, she sat down and placed her hands on the keys. For a fleeting second, the entire hall fell silent, holding its breath. Clara knew this was her moment. All the doubts, fears, and insecurities melted away as she prepared to play, not for fame or recognition, but because the music demanded to be heard. Little did she know what happened next would leave everyone in the room utterly speechless. The grand hall, once alive with chatter and laughter, slowly quieted as Clara approached the stage. Her presence alone seemed to cast a ripple of curiosity among the audience. People turned their heads, not because they were excited to see her, but because they wondered who this unassuming woman was. She didn't look like the other performers. No flashy outfits, no confident stride, no air of importance. Instead, she walked with a certain hesitance, her shoulders slightly hunched as if trying to make herself smaller. The murmurs began almost immediately. "Who is she?" one man whispered to his companion, his tone laced with skepticism. "Probably someone's cousin," another replied with a dismissive shrug. "You know how these open mic slots go." A group of young musicians sitting near the front exchanged amused glances, clearly expecting little from her performance. Even the waitstaff, balancing trays of hors d'oeuvres and champagne glasses, seemed uninterested in her as they continued their rounds. To them, Clara was just another name on the list, a filler act meant to occupy time between the real stars of the evening. Clara, however, didn't seem to notice, or perhaps she chose not to. As she stepped onto the stage, her eyes remained fixed on the gleaming black Steinway piano waiting for her at the center. The spotlight above cast a soft glow over her, highlighting the simplicity of her navy blue dress and the nervousness etched into her face. For a moment she stood frozen, her hands clasped tightly together in front of her. It was as though she was battling an invisible force holding her back, whispering doubts into her ear. The maestro, Victor Langlois, sat in the front row, leaning casually against the armrest of his chair. His reputation preceded him. He was known not only for his extraordinary talent, but also for his sharp critiques and high standards. Over the years, he had judged countless amateur performances, and rarely had any of them impressed him. Tonight was no exception. When Clara's name had been announced, he hadn't even bothered to sit up straight. He assumed this would be yet another forgettable rendition of a classical piece, or worse, a clumsy attempt at improvisation. Still, there was something about her demeanor that caught his attention. Not admiration exactly, but a flicker of curiosity. Why did she look so nervous? What was she doing here, surrounded by people far more accomplished than herself? These questions lingered in the back of his mind as he watched her settle onto the piano bench. Clara adjusted herself carefully, smoothing out the fabric of her dress before placing her hands gently on the keys. Her fingers hovered uncertainly, for a moment, trembling ever so slightly. The silence in the room grew heavier, almost suffocating. Some in the audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others exchanged impatient glances. They weren't used to waiting this long for a performance to begin. Normally, performers launched into their pieces without hesitation, eager to showcase their skills. But Clara wasn't like the others. She wasn't here to prove anything to anyone. Not yet, anyway. Then, just as the tension in the room reached its peak, Clara closed her eyes. It was a small gesture, barely noticeable, but it transformed her entirely. In that instant, the nervous woman who had walked onto the stage disappeared, replaced by someone else entirely. Someone calm, focused, and resolute. She took a deep breath, letting it out slowly, and then, with a gentle touch, pressed down on the keys. The first note rang out, clear and pure, filling the vast hall with a sound so delicate it felt like the entire world had paused to listen. It wasn't loud or showy. Instead, it carried a quiet strength, a kind of vulnerability that demanded attention. The audience, which had been buzzing with whispers and restless movements mere moments ago, fell completely silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Waiters froze mid-step, their trays forgotten. Even the maestro leaned forward slightly, his expression shifting from mild disinterest to cautious intrigue. As Clara continued to play, the melody unfolded like a story being told for the very first time. Each note flowed seamlessly into the next, creating a tapestry of sound that was both intricate and deeply emotional. There was no flashiness in her technique, no unnecessary flourishes designed to impress. Instead, every movement of her fingers seemed purposeful, deliberate, as if she were pouring her soul directly into the music. What struck the listeners most was the raw honesty of her performance. Unlike the polished renditions they had heard earlier in the evening, Clara's playing felt alive, almost fragile. It was as though she wasn't performing for them at all, but rather sharing a part of herself, a private, intimate moment laid bare for everyone to witness. And somehow, despite the vastness of the hall and the number of people present, it felt deeply personal, as if she were speaking directly to each individual heart. Victor Langlois found himself unable to look away. His initial skepticism melted away, replaced by genuine fascination. He had heard countless pianists in his lifetime, some technically flawless, others brimming with passion, but none quite like this. There was a purity to Clara's playing that transcended skill or training. It was music born not from ambition or ego, but from a place of profound emotion and authenticity. Around him, the audience began to stir, not with impatience this time, but with awe. Eyes widened, jaws dropped, and some even placed their hands over their mouths in disbelief. A few people exchanged astonished glances, silently asking each other, "Who is this woman?" The same question echoed in their minds, but now it came not from mockery or dismissal, but from sheer amazement. By the time Clara reached the halfway point of her piece, the atmosphere in the hall had shifted entirely. No longer was she the timid, overlooked figure who had nervously taken the stage moments earlier. Now she was the undeniable center of attention, commanding the room not through force or bravado, but through the sheer power of her artistry. Every note she played resonated deeply, weaving its way into the hearts of those listening. Even the skeptics, the ones who had smirked and whispered cruel jokes about her appearance, were silenced. Their smirks faded, replaced by expressions of wonder and respect. They couldn't deny what they were hearing. Something extraordinary, something unforgettable. Clara wasn't just playing the piano. She was breathing life into it, turning an instrument into a vessel for human emotion. And yet, despite the growing admiration around her, Clara remained oblivious to it all. Her focus never wavered from the music. She played not for applause or recognition, but because the melody demanded to be shared. For years, she had kept it locked away inside her, hidden from the world. But tonight, it had finally found its voice, and in doing so, it had given Clara hers as well. The first note had already silenced the room, but as Clara continued to play, the atmosphere transformed in ways no one could have anticipated. Each key she pressed seemed to unlock a new layer of emotion, drawing the audience deeper into the story her music was telling. What started as a tentative, almost fragile melody soon blossomed into something breathtakingly complex, yet profoundly relatable. It wasn't just music. It was a journey, a narrative woven with sound. Her fingers moved across the keys with a grace that belied her earlier nervousness. The notes flowed effortlessly, as if they had been waiting inside her for years, desperate to be released. There was an undeniable intimacy to her playing, as though she were sharing a secret only she understood. And yet, somehow, everyone in the hall felt like they understood it too. The melody carried whispers of longing, joy, sadness, and hope, all emotions universal enough to resonate with every listener, regardless of their background or experience. As the piece progressed, Clara's confidence grew. She leaned into the piano, her body swaying gently with the rhythm of the music. Her eyes remained closed, shielding her from the sea of faces watching her intently. This was her moment, her sanctuary, and nothing, not the skeptical glances, not the initial murmurs of disbelief, could take it away from her. For once, she wasn't thinking about what others might think or how she appeared to them. All that mattered was the music. The audience, meanwhile, was spellbound. People who had come expecting to critique or simply endure the open mic portion of the evening now sat transfixed, their attention riveted entirely on Clara. A young couple seated near the back held hands tightly, tears glistening in their eyes, as the melody tugged at memories they hadn't realized they still carried. An elderly man in the front row dabbed at his cheeks with a handkerchief, visibly moved by the raw emotion pouring out of the piano. Even the maestro, Victor Langlois, who prided himself on maintaining a composed demeanor, found himself leaning farther forward in his chair, his elbows resting on his knees as he listened intently. What made Clara's performance so extraordinary wasn't just its technical brilliance, though there was no denying her skill, but the way it connected with people on a deeply personal level. Her music didn't feel rehearsed or calculated. It felt spontaneous, alive, as if it were being created in real time. Every note carried weight, every pause spoke volumes. It was as though Clara had tapped into something primal, something fundamental, to the human experience and translated it into sound. Halfway through the piece, the tone shifted subtly. The gentle, introspective opening gave way to a more dynamic section, filled with cascading arpeggios and sweeping chords. The change was unexpected but seamless, pulling the listeners along with it like a river carrying leaves downstream. The energy in the room surged, matching the crescendo of the music. Some people instinctively leaned forward in their seats, drawn closer by the intensity of the moment. Others sat perfectly still, afraid that even the slightest movement might disrupt the magic unfolding before them. Then came the climax, a series of rapid, intricate passages that showcased Clara's technical mastery while retaining the emotional depth that had captivated everyone from the very first note. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, striking each key with precision and purpose. Yet, despite the complexity of the music, it never felt overwhelming or self-indulgent. Instead, it felt like the natural progression of a story reaching its peak, building toward a resolution that promised to leave a lasting impact. When the final chord finally rang out, filling the hall with a rich, resonant sound, the silence that followed was deafening. For several seconds, no one moved, no one spoke. It was as if the entire room, and perhaps the world beyond it, had been suspended in time. Then slowly, reality began to seep back in. Someone in the back let out a shaky breath. Another person clapped hesitantly at first, unsure if it was appropriate to break the spell. But within moments the applause erupted, thunderous and unrestrained, echoing off the walls of the grand hall. People rose to their feet, some clapping wildly, others wiping away tears. The ovation was instantaneous and overwhelming, a tidal wave of appreciation crashing over Clara. She sat frozen at the piano, her hands resting lightly on her lap, her chest rising and falling with the effort of catching her breath. The transformation in the room was staggering. Moments ago, she had been an invisible figure dismissed and ignored. Now she was the center of attention, the undeniable star of the evening. Even the skeptics, the ones who had smirked and whispered cruel jokes, when she first walked onto the stage, were on their feet, applauding with genuine enthusiasm. Their earlier mockery had vanished, replaced by awe and respect. They couldn't deny what they had just witnessed, a performance unlike anything they had ever experienced. Victor Langlois stood as well, his expression a mixture of admiration and disbelief. He had judged countless musicians over the years, many of whom possessed extraordinary talent. But this was different. Clara's playing wasn't just technically flawless, it was soulful, authentic, and deeply moving. It reminded him why he had fallen in love with music in the first place. Unable to contain his excitement, the maestro stepped up to the microphone at the edge of the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion, "I have been fortunate enough to witness some of the greatest musical performances in my lifetime. But tonight we have experienced something truly extraordinary." He paused, letting his words sink in before turning to Clara. "Clara, would you please tell us about this piece?" The spotlight shifted back to Clara, who blinked in surprise, clearly unprepared for the question. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded shyly. Rising from the piano bench, she walked to the microphone, her steps slow and uncertain. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady, carrying the same sincerity that had defined her performance. "This piece is called Whispers of Home," she began, her gaze fixed on the floor as if gathering courage. "I wrote it for my mother, who passed away a few years ago. She was the one who introduced me to music, who encouraged me to keep playing even when life got hard. This melody is inspired by the memories we shared, the quiet moments, the laughter, the struggles. It's my way of keeping her close, of honoring the lessons she taught me." Her words hung in the air, simple yet profound. As she spoke, the audience listened intently, hanging on every syllable. Many nodded in understanding, their own thoughts drifting to loved ones they had lost or cherished memories they held dear. Clara's vulnerability struck a chord with them, reminding them of the power of art to connect us across boundaries of time and space. When she finished speaking, the applause resumed, louder and more heartfelt than before. Clara smiled faintly, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment and gratitude. She hadn't expected this reaction, not the standing ovation, not the praise from the maestro, not the outpouring of emotion from strangers. But as she looked out at the sea of smiling faces, she realized something important. Her music had touched people. It had spoken to them in ways words never could. For the first time that evening, Clara allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she belonged here after all. The applause didn't stop. It swelled and surged, filling the grand hall with a sound so powerful it seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Clara stood by the microphone, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, unsure of what to do next. The spotlight was still on her, brighter now than ever before, and for the first time that evening, she felt its warmth, not as something intimidating, but as a comforting embrace. She had spent years hiding in the shadows, afraid to step into the light, but tonight, the light had found her. Victor Langlois, the maestro whose name carried weight in every corner of the musical world, was the first to approach her after the performance. His usual composed demeanor was replaced by an almost childlike excitement, his eyes gleaming with admiration. "Clara," he said, extending his hand, "I don't think I've ever heard anything quite like that. Your music, it's extraordinary." Clara hesitated for a moment before shaking his hand, her own trembling slightly. "Thank you," she replied softly, her voice barely audible over the lingering applause. "I didn't expect—" "You didn't expect this?" Victor interrupted, gesturing toward the cheering crowd. He chuckled, a warm, genuine laugh that put Clara at ease. "No one expects moments like these. They find us when we least anticipate them. But let me tell you something. What you just did wasn't just a performance, it was a gift, and gifts like yours deserve to be shared with the world." His words struck a chord deep within Clara. For so long she had kept her music hidden, treating it as a private sanctuary rather than something meant for others. But now, standing in front of an audience that refused to let her leave the stage, without acknowledging her brilliance, she began to see her talent in a new light. Maybe her mother had been right all those years ago when she told Clara that her gift could bring joy to others. Maybe it was time to stop doubting herself and trust that her music had value beyond her own four walls. As Victor stepped aside, other attendees approached Clara, each eager to express their admiration. A young woman in a glittering gown hugged, her tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Your piece reminded me of my grandmother," she confessed. "It was like you took everything I've been feeling and turned it into something beautiful." An older gentleman, his hair streaked with gray, shook her hand firmly and said, "You have a rare gift, my dear. Don't waste it. The world needs more people like you." The compliments poured in one after another until Clara felt overwhelmed, not by the attention itself, but by the realization that her music had truly connected with people. These weren't empty words. They were heartfelt expressions of gratitude, reflections of how deeply her melody had resonated with each listener. Some spoke of memories rekindled, others of emotions laid bare, and still others of hope renewed. Clara listened quietly, nodding and smiling, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and humility. But the surprises didn't end there. As the evening drew to a close and the crowd began to disperse, Victor Langlois sought Clara out once again. This time he wasn't alone. With him was a representative from a renowned record label, a woman named Elena Moreau, known for discovering hidden gems in the music industry. Her sharp eyes and confident posture made it clear she was someone who knew talent when she saw it. "Miss Clara," Elena began, her tone professional yet warm, "I must admit, I came here tonight expecting to scout some promising young artists from the conservatory. Instead, I stumbled upon something far greater, a true original. Your composition, it's unlike anything I've heard in years. Would you consider recording an album? We'd love to help you share your work with a wider audience." Clara blinked, stunned. An album? The idea felt surreal, almost impossible. She had never imagined herself as someone who could produce music professionally. Yet as she looked around the room, at the faces of strangers who had been moved to tears by her playing, at the maestro who continued to encourage her, at the representative offering her a chance she hadn't even dared to dream of, she realized that maybe this was her moment. Maybe this was the universe nudging her forward, telling her it was time to take a leap of faith. I'll think about it," Clara stammered, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Thank you so much for the offer. It means a lot." Elena smiled knowingly. "Take your time, but I urge you not to wait too long. Talent like yours doesn't come along every day." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. People continued to congratulate Clara, sharing stories of how her music had touched them. By the time she finally left the conservatory, the streets outside were quiet, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. The contrast between the bustling energy of the recital hall and the peaceful calm of the night was striking, giving Clara a moment to reflect on everything that had happened. Walking home, she replayed the events of the evening in her mind. The nervousness she had felt stepping onto the stage, the way the audience had initially dismissed her, the transformative power of her music, and the overwhelming response that followed. It all seemed like a dream. Yet as she reached into her pocket and felt the business card Elena had slipped into her hand, she knew it was real. This wasn't just a fleeting moment of recognition. It was the beginning of something bigger. When Clara arrived home, she sat down at her old upright piano, the same one she had practiced on for years, and ran her fingers lightly over the keys. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. She thought about her mother who had always believed in her and whispered a silent thank you. Then, closing her eyes, she began to play. The melody that emerged wasn't whispers of home this time, but something new, an idea forming in her mind inspired by the whirlwind of emotions she had experienced that night. Clara didn't sleep much that night. Her mind raced with possibilities, questions, and dreams she had long buried. Could she really pursue music professionally? What would it mean to share her compositions with the world? Would people continue to respond to her work the way they had tonight? These thoughts kept her awake, but they also filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. The next morning, Clara woke up determined. She pulled out a notebook where she had scribbled fragments of melodies and lyrics over the years. Flipping through the pages, she marveled at how much of herself she had poured into these unfinished pieces. Each one told a story, some joyful, others painful, but all of them authentic. She realized that her music wasn't just a hobby or a pastime, it was a part of who she was. And if she wanted to honor her mother's memory, if she wanted to stay true to herself, she couldn't keep it hidden any longer. Over the following days, offers and opportunities began flooding in. Local newspapers wrote glowing articles about her performance, calling her the unexpected star of the recital. Social media buzzed with clips of her playing, shared by attendees who had recorded her piece on their phones. Music schools invited her to give workshops, and community centers asked if she would perform at charity events. Even strangers reached out, sending messages of encouragement and gratitude. Through it all, Clara remained grounded. She declined some invitations, knowing she needed time to process everything, but accepted others that aligned with her values. Performing for small, intimate audiences felt less intimidating than large-scale concerts, and she found joy in connecting with people on a personal level. Every time she played, she reminded herself why she had started making music in the first place, not for fame or recognition, but because it brought her happiness and allowed her to connect with others. One afternoon, as she prepared for a local benefit concert, Clara received a call from Victor Langlois. "I've arranged for you to perform at the International Concert Series next month," he announced, his voice brimming with excitement. "It's an incredible platform, and I believe it's exactly where you belong." Clara's heart skipped a beat. The International Concert Series was one of the most prestigious platforms for musicians worldwide. To be invited to perform there was a dream come true, one she hadn't even allowed herself to imagine. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm still so new to all of this." "Clara," Victor interrupted gently, "you may be new to performing publicly, but your talent is timeless. Trust me, you're ready." With those words, Clara made her decision. She would accept the invitation, not because she felt pressured to prove herself, but because she wanted to share her music with as many people as possible. She knew there would be challenges ahead, nerves to overcome, expectations to manage, but she also knew she wouldn't be facing them alone. The support she had received from Victor, Elena, and countless others had shown her that she didn't have to navigate this journey by herself. That evening, as Clara practiced for her upcoming performances, she felt a profound sense of peace. The doubts and fears that had haunted her for so long began to fade, replaced by a quiet confidence. She wasn't just a simple woman who had once been ignored at a piano recital. She was a musician, a storyteller, and a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever doubted their worth. And though the road ahead was uncertain, she was ready to walk it, one note at a time. Clara's life changed in ways she could never have imagined after that fateful night at the Conservatoire de Musique. The once overlooked woman who had nervously taken the stage was now a name on everyone's lips. Yet, despite the whirlwind of attention and opportunities flooding her way, Clara remained grounded. She didn't wake up the next morning expecting to transform into someone new or pretending to be someone she wasn't. Instead, she stayed true to herself, the quiet, unassuming woman who simply loved music. The days following the recital were a blur of activity. Reporters called eager to interview the hidden gem of the conservatory. Local newspapers ran glowing articles about her performance, calling her a voice for the unheard and a reminder of the power of authenticity. Social media lit up with videos of her playing, recorded by audience members during the recital. Within hours, those clips went viral, garnering thousands of views and comments from people around the world. Strangers reached out sharing how her music had touched them, how it brought back memories of loved ones, healed old wounds, or gave them hope during difficult times. Clara read every message, her heart swelling with gratitude. For the first time in her life, she realized just how much her music meant, not only to her but to others as well. But fame came with its own set of challenges. Invitations poured in from all corners. Prestigious venues wanted her to perform. Charities asked her to headline fundraisers, and even television shows requested appearances. At first, Clara accepted everything, feeling an overwhelming sense of obligation to say yes. After all, these were doors she had never dreamed would open for her. But soon, the weight of expectations began to take its toll. Late-night rehearsals, endless emails, and constant scrutiny left her exhausted. One evening, as she sat alone, at her piano staring blankly at the keys, she realized something important. She couldn't let this newfound success consume her. Music had always been her sanctuary, her escape from the pressures of life. If she allowed it to become another source of stress, she risked losing the very essence of what made her gift special. Determined to reclaim her balance, Clara started setting boundaries. She turned down offers that didn't align with her values or felt too overwhelming. Instead, she focused on projects that resonated with her personally, performances at community centers, schools, and hospitals, where her music could reach people who needed it most. These intimate settings reminded her why she had fallen in love with playing the piano in the first place. It wasn't about applause or accolades. It was about connection. Whether she was performing for a room full of children or a single patient confined to a hospital bed, Clara found joy in knowing that her melodies might bring comfort or inspiration to someone else. Her debut album, titled Whispers of Home, became a labor of love. Working closely with Elena Moreau and a small team of producers, Clara poured her heart into the project. Each track told a story, some drawn from her own experiences, others inspired by the lives of those she had met along the way. There was a piece dedicated to her mother, of course, capturing the warmth and wisdom she had imparted throughout Clara's childhood. Another composition reflected the loneliness of city streets late at night, while yet another celebrated the beauty of finding light in darkness. When the album was finally released, critics hailed it as a masterpiece of raw emotion and a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The response was overwhelming. Fans wrote letters describing how certain songs had helped them through tough times. One young woman shared how listening to Whispers of Home had given her strength during chemotherapy treatments. A soldier stationed overseas sent Clara a heartfelt note, thanking her for reminding him of the comforts of home. These stories reinforced Clara's belief in the transformative power of music. It wasn't just entertainment, it was a lifeline for so many. Despite her growing success, Clara refused to let herself get swept away by the trappings of celebrity. She continued living in her modest apartment, cooking simple meals and practicing diligently each day. Fame hadn't changed her priorities. If anything, it deepened her commitment to staying authentic. She turned down lucrative endorsement deals that would have required her to compromise her artistic integrity. Instead, she chose collaborations that aligned with her vision, such as working with organizations that supported underprivileged youth interested in music. Her goal was clear: to use her platform not just for personal gain but to uplift others. One of the highlights of Clara's journey came when she performed at the International Concert Series, an event Victor Langlois had personally arranged for her. Standing on the grand stage before a packed auditorium, she felt a mix of nerves and excitement. This was a far cry from the small, dimly lit hall where she had first played Whispers of Home. But as she placed her hands on the keys and began to play, she remembered the lesson she had learned that night. Trust the music. Let it guide you. And so she did. Her performance earned a standing ovation, bringing tears to the eyes of both seasoned musicians and casual listeners alike. Afterward, Victor approached her backstage, his face glowing with pride. "You see, Clara," he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "This is where you belong. Not because of your talent alone, but because of the heart you bring to your craft." Clara smiled, humbled by his words. "Thank you for believing in me," she replied softly. "I couldn't have done any of this without your encouragement, and without the support of everyone who has stood by me." As months turned into years, Clara's career flourished. She traveled the world performing in iconic concert halls and remote villages alike. Everywhere she went, she carried her mother's memory with her, drawing inspiration from the lessons of kindness, perseverance, and humility she had taught her. Her compositions evolved, reflecting the diverse cultures and stories she encountered along the way. Yet no matter how far she ventured, she always returned home, to her little apartment, her upright piano, and the quiet moments that fueled her creativity. Looking back, Clara marveled at how far she had come. From the shy, overlooked woman at the piano recital to an internationally acclaimed musician, her journey was nothing short of extraordinary. But more than the awards or accolades, what mattered most to her was the impact she had made. Through Her music, she had touched countless lives, proving that even the simplest acts of courage could ripple outward in unimaginable ways. And so Clara kept playing, not for fame or fortune, but because it was who she was. Her story served as a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever doubted their worth or feared stepping into the spotlight. It was a reminder that greatness often hides in plain sight, waiting patiently for the right moment to shine. For Clara, that moment had arrived the night she pressed her fingers to the keys and let her melody speak louder than words ever could.